Thank you so much for joining us for this very important panel of national experts that will speak to you about school safety in this school safety panel. Very rarely do you have the opportunity to have access to so many valuable and experienced experts on the most viable threat that impacts the United States domestically at this time, which is those of an active assailant or an active shooter, and specifically in our schools. Very scary, very intimidating, and not a topic very many people like to talk about, but one of the most important things that we need to normalize asking questions about, understanding how to prepare for, and what it means to know that you are prepared, you and your community are prepared for this viable threat. We've pulled this team together of, as I said, national experts so that they can share with you not just their personal experience, but understand how they've applied their personal experience to helping everyone for the next foreseeable future prevent the senseless acts of violence that can impact both the public and the private sector, whether that be public and private schools, university institutions, or even in large gatherings such as churches, malls, arenas, concerts, sporting events, any time where the public is unprotected and can be. I would like for this national panel of experts to introduce themselves. I am Lauren Fast. I will be your moderator today. And I will start with our wonderful friend, Frank from Colorado. Frank, introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm Frank DeAngelis, and I'm a Colorado native. And I started my career in education in 1979 at Columbine High School. And I was a social studies teacher, assistant football, and head baseball coach. And then, as someone said, I went to the dark side and I became an administrator in 1996. And I became the principal at Columbine High School. And my staff said, "So now you're one of them." And so I was in my 20th year at Columbine and finishing my third year as principal at Columbine, in which a day in which my life changed forever, April 20th, 1999, something that I was never prepared for. And unfortunately, we had two of my students that entered the school and killed 12 students and Mr. Sanders. And so it was at that time I stated that I just joined a club in which no one wants to be a member. And unfortunately, that membership continues to grow. And I stayed on 15 years after that tragedy, because when that event happened and I was just trying to figure out everything that happened that day, which I couldn't, I had to rebuild that community. And I felt in retiring in 2014, I've done that. And even though I am failing retirement, I continue to reach out and help these other communities going through this. And it's just an honor to be here with this outstanding panel today, because we can make a difference. And I made a promise, it's Columbine represents a time to remember, but it also represents a time to hope. And once again, thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you so much, Frank. We are grateful for your continuation of spreading that hope and level of expertise. Julie, Dr. Julie also, yes, right? Yes. Dr. Julie Lauk, share a little bit about why you are on the panel today.
Well, I'm a retired superintendent from Indiana. I actually entered education in 1993 after a career in law enforcement as a police dispatcher. So I have a little bit of law enforcement background in that regard, but I retired in 2020, and I am a school certified safety specialist in Indiana. And I did my dissertation on averting incidents of school rampage violence. And I did a qualitative study and have always kept school violence and school safety at the forefront of everything I do. So I also am very honored to be here today to offer whatever I can to the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Chief, welcome. Thank you for this panel. Share with us the level of expertise that you bring to this discussion.
So my name is Tony Pastezi. I'm the former police chief of Coral Springs in Florida. sister city right next door to the city of Parkland, which had, unfortunately, in February 14th of 2018, the Parkland massacre at Stoneman Douglas High School. While we were not the responsible agency to handle policing in that city, me and my staff responded to that horrible massacre, and were instrumental in getting into buildings looking for the shooter, and subsequently making the arrest. So ironically, I retired. I was at the Coral Springs Police Department for 30 years. I retired 3 weeks after on a planned retirement from this massacre, but thought I was going into retirement, but really felt it was important to get the message out on what lessons learned and help, like Frank said earlier, help the next generation of officers and school administrators to understand better ways to be prepared. And that's what I do now. I travel the country doing that.
Okay. Okay, great. And Mr. Swip, Mr. Tom Swip, share the perspective that you bring to this conversation.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it. And thanks for moderating today. So I'm a 30-year technologist. So I grew up in the technology industry, cut my teeth with the United Parcel Service back in the 90s when we were putting tablets in the hands of drivers before tablets were even a thing. So we've been working on mobile devices for quite some time. Currently, I am the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Guard 911, where we offer a mobile panic button solution for school shootings. So we are trying to help get officers to the scene of the tragedy as quickly as we can.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here and sharing your variety, your varied perspectives, so that we can work to train and mitigate future instances. I want to start with a series of questions, and I'm going to go to Frank first. Frank, you have the longest working history of not just dealing with, but being a frontline participant in school shooting massacres. And from even my own perspective, I recall where I was when the Columbine incident took place, and it had such a ripple effect on the entire country. No one ever imagined such an incident would ever take place. And as the administrator of that building at that time, I mean, that was 22 years ago. What is the piece that you share with people as across the country people reach out to you for help and support to consult in existing tragedies, even to today? What is the piece that you immediately know that you can share and you can offer to those that reach out to you because of your historical context?
Well, Lauren, you bring up a key point. If you would have told me that a Columbine could have happened at Columbine 22 years ago, I would have said no.
Mm-hmm.
And each time I reach out, whether it was Parkland, Sandy Hook, the first thing they say is, I can't believe it happened here.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we were never prepared for. And one of the things that I share is, we are in this journey alone. And I know we have a tendency to say these school shootings continue to happen, but I think a key point is the fact how many have been stopped because of things we're doing right now, the work that many of us are doing. And I just think back that horrific day, we did not have these lockdown drills. We did not have systems such as our 911. I mean, the only drills we did back then were fire drills, and that was it. And we're very fortunate that we did the very best we could of what we had. And so I look at that now, there's so many different things in place, and we got to continue to do it. And I think the most important thing that I can share at this point, I was asked this immediately, what are you going to do as a principal? I said, what are we going to do? They're all of our kids. And what I see happening now that was not necessarily happening 22 years ago is police officers are working with firefighters, that are working with school administrators, that are working with judges, because they're all of our kids. And that's the most important thing. And that's why this panel is such a good idea today, because we are bringing different perspectives. And, one more life is one too many, and we refuse to give in.
Absolutely. Thank you. Julie, you said that you wrote your dissertation on school safety. What motivated you to do that?
As a former police dispatcher and the wife of a retired police officer, I obviously entered into education with safety and security in my blood. So to do a dissertation on something that was something very important to me and meaningful to me, as they always say, when you do your dissertation, pick a topic that you don't mind being married to, because you do spend a lot of time on it. So I chose to do the qualitative study, which engaged me in conversations with people who had experience with school incidents of school violence, and just have those deep conversations about what happened, why they thought it happened, what they thought might help alleviate some of that. So it was just something that was always in my blood when I entered education. So it was just a natural fit.
Well, thank you for being such a strong advocate and continuing to speak up for that and to support these initiatives and these needs, these unspoken needs beyond that of a fire drill. It's almost laughable that that's where we spend our time focusing energy and effort on just elemental issues.
Absolutely.
Tony, I can't even imagine what it was like to have been the highest ranking officer to respond to Parkland. I mean, that alone, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm in awe. It's an awe-inspiring element to be in front of you and Frank and Julie and just understand how you have worked to support and protect lives in your work, in your time as your career. What would be your biggest concern now if you were ever involved in a similar situation moving forward?
I think failing to remember what happened in the past. When you listen to Frank talk about what happened 22 years ago at Columbine, you say, we need to learn from that. And we did in a lot of regards. But, in my particular case, my department was very trained for an event like this. We spent a lot of time, resources, and energy doing that. We responded to a situation in an adjoining city that was surrounded by us. So obviously our response was critical to helping that or just other jurisdiction out. That being said, I think, Columbine for law enforcement was a paradigm shift. And I believe that Parkland now is going to be a paradigm shift as far as our responses. We trained for years with single officer response, multi-officer response. Our whole goal in law enforcement these days is get to the threat as soon as possible. In this particular case, there were some human failures for sure, leadership failures, but the communication failures really slowed things down. And I think with the new technology that's out there now, like as I mentioned before, Guard 911, there's platforms out there now that can get law enforcement there faster. And truly, every second matters. I mean, it truly does. So the faster you can get a badge there is extremely important. So that's the one thing I'm worried about. Some areas in this country are just not prepared for that. I travel all over the country and talk to places, and I hate to say it, but even 22 years later after Columbine, like Frank said, there's places that say, I didn't think it could happen here. Never should we ever say those words because you failed to lead. You failed to prepare.
Okay. Tom, can technology help these situations?
Yeah, absolutely, Lauren. So as you've seen with some of the other comments right now, what we need to do is we need to get the word out to the police officers faster. So the only real way to eliminate this threat is to get law enforcement on scene as quickly as possible. So these guys that are out there, guys or gals that are out there that are doing this, they've got one goal in mind, and it's to take down as many people as they can to increase the body count. A lot of these guys are extreme gamers and things like that, and they want to have the highest body count. They're proud of the fact that they had the biggest massacre. So really, there's no negotiating. There's no reasoning with these people. They're coming in with many weapons fully loaded, and really the only solution is to get police in the front door as quickly as possible. And the only way to do that is to reduce notification time. So if you think about notification time and response time, they're two very different things. So response time, most people think they can pick up the phone and 911 is going to show up at their door, when that's not actually the fact. It's got to go through dispatch. Someone's got to be nearby, and they're going to get there as quickly as possible. And they do an incredible job. But that response time is the time from when you call to the time that they get there. The most important thing, and what happened in like a Sandy Hook example, is it took a while to get the word out. So notification time needs to be reduced. So with everyone carrying a mobile phone around in their pocket, the most logical thing to do is get this message into the hands of whoever is nearby. So not just necessarily the officers that are there in uniform, but other officers from all jurisdictions that can get there as quickly as possible. So technology can absolutely help. And really technology is the only thing that's going to get that notification time shortened so that the response time can be shortened as well.
So when you talk about notification and response time, what we're saying is, and I just want to paraphrase this because I think that this part is the most important, that technology is not going to make an officer or anyone drive a vehicle to the location faster. It's the technology that's going to let them know they need to drive their vehicle there sooner. They know to do that point A to point B travel faster than they would if they went through a standard phone call, dispatch, deployment, alert.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you think about this, there are so many different jurisdictions out there that might not get the initial alert. So, all police radios don't talk with each other, which is something else that most people don't understand. So if we can get the information out to local police, state police, county police, we've even had tribal police inside of our system, law enforcement that are in the FBI, any kind of federal marshal, any of the different jurisdictions, if we can get this message out to more people faster, we're going to have more people show up quicker and eliminate the threat.
So as an example of this and how to prepare in a modern way, Frank, let us know 22 years ago, how did you initiate the need to call for help? How did that happen?
It was a mess. I remember when my secretary came in and she said, Frank, there's been a report of gunfire. And the first thing that crossed my mind, this has to be a senior prank.
Oh,
We're near the end of graduation, or we're near graduation. And I remember running out into the hallway, encountering the gunman. And the last thing I said to my secretary is call 911. Well, back 22 years ago, the cell phone service was not what it was today. And just trying to be able to communicate. There was so much miscommunication, and there was multi law enforcement agencies coming that could not even communicate. And it was even to the point that we could not even shut off the fire alarm. At one point they said, Frank, this be on the call of duty, but would you be willing to put on body armor to go in to disable the fire alarm for when the SWAT team arrives so they can go in? And so this is where we were. And when the SWAT team did arrive, about 58 minutes after the original shots were fired, they could not communicate in the building, and they had no idea where the threats were coming from. And so I look at the systems that we have today. Tom is talking about Guard 911 and Tony's talking about, I truly believe that if we would have had a system similar, that the body count would not have been what it was.
Okay. I actually want to jump with that to Tony. Chief, you talked about training and you talked about initial officer response, and then, the multiple situations where maybe one or two people are the first to arrive on scene. Talk to us about those modern training methods and how they've worked to mitigate some of what was experienced in Columbine, but how that works in concert with modern technology.
So looking back 22 years ago, 1999 with Columbine, every officer that responded waited for a SWAT team. Back in that time, I was actually part of a SWAT team, and that was our protocols in law enforcement. But that shift happened where we said we can't wait. We can't sit outside of a building and wait for people to be killed, murdered inside, and wait for more people. So the majority of departments in this country have trained over the years to get in there fast. Try to take down the shooter, at least advance on the shooter, try to get the carnage to stop. So that's probably one of the biggest hurdles that we, or focuses we've had over the years. But and I forget if it was Tom or Frank said it, but the communications kind of always lagged. Like, you're exactly right, Lauren. If the officer, as soon as he gets notified, is going to get there as fast as possible. I can't even tell you how fast I can't even tell you how I got there, because you're just zoned in on going. But my delayed response was because our dispatchers were getting it, but there is seconds. I mean, just seconds, minutes go by, and with the new technology that Frank was just talking about, it would have allowed officers from many jurisdictions to get to that school as fast as possible. And I do think it would have saved lives.
And because of modern training methods, officers are trained to arrive in that stuttered way, not all at once or wait all at once. A single officer is trained to behave in the appropriate way to mitigate such an instance.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk on every department. I can talk on what we did and what we trained, and we absolutely trained that way. Our officers understood that their job was to go and at least try to affect some kind of damage, to the person that's hurting other people. But at the same time, it does really come down to communication. We know what we do when we get there. It's just as fast as we can get there.
Have to know to go there. Have to know to get there. Julie, when you were superintendent, you had to have fears about potential situations, just this viable threat of violence in a school, but not just one school, but a whole district. As a superintendent, when you knew that you were in charge of so many bodies, what would you offer to other superintendents that are watching this amazing panel right now? What would you share with them who are tuning into this now about how to prepare, or what they need to know that they don't know right now?
I think the most important thing for superintendents is really they have to be the safety leader in their district. They have to take charge of that. They have to make it their culture, their responsibility. We as superintendents can delegate a lot of tasks to other people. And even a superintendent might be blessed enough to have a director of safety and security, right? But they can't let go of their responsibility as a superintendent. My biggest fear, even as a superintendent, was always the students coming into my building that day to learn, the staff members coming into work, the volunteers coming in to offer their time and talents would come into my buildings, but not make it home at night, right? It was the same fear I had as the wife of a police officer. I'd hit him on the chest every day before he left for work to make sure he had his vest on, but I knew in the back of my mind and in my heart, he might not make it home because that's just what, that's part of the job. So as I did as a superintendent, I made safety and security the culture in my district. I made it important. I had a director of safety and security. I had a transportation director who was a former assistant police chief. So I had the right people in place, but I never once took my eye off the ball of safety and security. It was something that I took personal responsibility for. And if I could offer anything to superintendents, it would be make sure that you are the leader in directing what happens with your culture in the area of safety and security. And a lot of the superintendents out there right now will understand when I say this. I know there are days when you need to get out of that office and you want to go to that kindergarten classroom because you need that love, right? And it's as simple as, even if you have someone else who is in charge of the day-to-day operations of safety and security, when you go to those buildings, do a quick safety audit, take a look around, right? Did a kind parent coming out of the elementary school just let you in without perhaps knowing who you are? And address those situations immediately. You don't have to browbeat people or, embarrass or humiliate folks, but you do need to make them aware, hey, maybe, just maybe you need to take a look at retraining some of your folks on who they let in the building or why we don't just let people in the building. So my words of wisdom to a superintendent watching this would be, don't delegate this. Take it on yourself and be the leader for safety and security in your district.
Well, and as the leader of safety and security in your district, you implemented a mobile safety plan in your district that the Indiana governor later said would be a model for all Indiana schools to follow. So we thank you very much. And I'm sure the state of Indiana knows, or if they don't know, they can learn to thank you for leading the charge as a school safety leader. And it shouldn't take the need to be connected to law enforcement as you were to understand that, but to know now how we can protect the unprotected. That's a really important piece. So we're learning, Frank, we're all learning from you and your tragedy. We're all learning from that. I want to, Tom, what I've heard people say, and we're talking about technology too, right? How can we use this in a modern way? But what I've heard say is it involves the school safety officer and the superintendent and the teachers and the administration, and not just the law enforcement, the police officers, but fire and ambulance and 911 and dispatchers. There's a lot of elements that play to this. And in communities that are neighboring, there's multi-jurisdictions that are impacted by a single site, a single incidence. So how does technology support this coordinated effort and make that easy? Because I think that the alarm bells go off, but they don't just go off for one person. In technology, they can go off for everyone all at once. Is that right?
Yeah, it sure can. So if we look at it in the old radio aspect, you've got a transmitter and you've got a receiver. So I send it from here and I pick it up over here. Our transmitter is called School Guard and our receiver is called the Hero 911 network. So I want to focus in on that a little bit. The Hero 911 network is a volunteer network where you can pick up your mobile device, you can go out to the App Store and you can download, if you're a law enforcement officer, the Hero 911 app. That app then allows you into our system. And if there's a shooting at a protected property anywhere near you, you would get notified. And Lauren, to answer your question, that's the key there. So we only allow officers in. We do not allow anyone else into the Hero 911 network. We actually vet them to make sure that they are officers. And then we also allow the 911 dispatch centers in. So they can also have this app on their devices at their location. So if there is a transmitter that sends it, the receiver gets it, but everybody gets it. So we bridge the radios, we bridge any kind of other communication systems. It's an instantaneous notification that we send it out as soon as we receive it. So there's no delay or anything along those lines. So it's really about getting as many people notified in as many different jurisdictions and 911 as quickly as possible. And like I mentioned before, that's local police, state police, county police, tribal police, NSA, FBI, the federal marshals, just anybody that you mentioned. This particular app is whitelisted for the FBI phones. So all FBI are allowed to carry this on their devices. So we've got to get that in the hands of as many people as we can. And once we do that, we can get as many people there as quickly as possible.
So there is a way to protect with modern technology.
Absolutely.
And I think that the key here, because Frank, you talked about how complex it was and how confusing it was and what a mess it was. Tom, the answer to this is what? What does the technology really need to be for people?
Yeah, I really think it's a matter of getting it to what they're holding in their hand now or what they're carrying in their pocket right now. If we can get the message out that way and then turn it over to traditional channels of 911 and your policy protocol and everything along those lines. But back to our original point about notification time, we've got to get the notification time out as quickly as possible.
And just be simple. That simply needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a heavy conversation with relationship to schools and school districts. And there's a lot of conversations about that because that's what we hear about. And I really appreciate, Frank, what you said earlier. We don't hear about all of the situations that are mitigated or stopped before they take place. So just amazing kudos to law enforcement everywhere that is actively halting alarming and other senseless tragedy through the effective and modern trainings that they've gone through. And thanks to technology for us to have access to that as humans, to be able to mitigate those issues sooner. This can happen in both the public and the private sector. We know that, we acknowledged that earlier. I just want to thank all of you for answering these just few simple questions. And oh my goodness, how can we get in contact with you, Frank? How could a community or an agency or even a school district get in contact with you to learn more from you?
Sure. I can give you my email address. It's frankdeangelis1@yahoo.com. And every year now, the pandemic has kind of curved that, but every year I go out and present all different types of agencies, schools. I've been in Indiana several times, and Julie, you did a wonderful job up there. Law enforcement, just to kind of share my story. And one of the things that's so important is I think there are communities that believe if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen in our community, and that is false security. It's not to scare, it's to prepare. And so with all these wonderful people that are on this call today, there's so much knowledge, and they're all of our kids, and it doesn't matter, Indiana, Florida, they're all of our kids, and we have to do everything to make sure that we protect them.
We do. Thank you. Julie, how can people get in touch with you to learn to be a leader in their own school districts?
My email address is jlauk, JLAUCK65 @gmail.com. And my phone number, 574-360-05, or I'm sorry, I'm sorry, 574-850-6167. That's my new one. And I encourage anyone to call, to email, to reach out if they have questions about, what it takes for the leadership aspect of implementing systems like the alert system that we implemented, or building relationships with law enforcement, any aspect of school safety. I'm just offering my personal experience, my knowledge, and just really hope that people can reach out if they have questions. I am more than happy to help walk through.
We are grateful for that. Chief, how can a person or an institution or an organization reach out to you?
Well, I have a website, 4starstrategies.com. They can reach out to me by emailing me at tonyp@4starstrategies.com, or they can reach out to me on my cell phone. I give it out freely these days, maybe not as a chief, but I do now, 954-868-4894. And I just will wrap up my side of it with this. If you hear anybody say, we didn't think it was going to happen here, that in 2021, with everything we've seen, I am so scared of schools opening up for real in August, because with all the other noise out there, I think we're losing sight of protecting our children. And I think it's incumbent on us as this panel is to get out there and push the message as much as possible and try and get the word out. We have to be ready. It's not going to go away. And
evidence exists that all former mass tragedies have been the result of a long-term calculated planning and systematically and methodically preparing to cause harm and do damage. And what we've learned in 2020, number one, is that everything can be done virtually. So if people have this time at home on their hands, they've been given more time to systematically and methodically plan a potential incident. And that, I think, is what you're talking about, that we need to be very prepared for this when schools open up again, for what might be being brought through the doors for the first time in a long time for some schools.
Yes, and look, COVID is a killer, but the other side, other issues with COVID is domestic violence, homicides have gone up, teen suicides have gone up, and what you just said is 100% true. These kids are sitting home isolated, they have no friends, they have no communication outside their room. All they have is a laptop computer in most cases and video games, and it's very scary.
Tom, how could someone ask questions about the implementation of modern technology or the use of an app to protect their communities, their schools, their churches, their workplaces?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Our website is guard911.com. That's GUARD911.com. We do a lot of really good content posting out there to make sure that we're spreading the word on what we know and sharing everything that we know with everybody that's out there. And then my email is tom@guard911.com. We'd love to help you brainstorm solutions, discuss tabletop exercises, whatever the case may be. But to piggyback off of what Tony said, Tony, we believe the same threat is out there. These kids have had lots of time and they're furious that they didn't get their state championship or get to go to their prom or whatever the case is. And, everybody's a little bit unstable right now, so we're afraid that when schools open back up, that same threat is out there and it exists. So we'd be more than happy to talk with anybody about their concerns and how they might be able to mitigate those.
Everyone, thank you so much for your time and your dedication. In some cases, your multi-decade commitment to the safety and the security of the future of this country and our children, and which is, ultimately the future for all of us. I know that I always want to feel comfortable that where I live, I can choose to live here, stay here, work here, play here comfortably, and that I would be able to travel and enjoy the other great places in this country with comfort and solace, knowing that there are well-trained and well-coordinated efforts and a multi-jurisdiction effort. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time. This has been wonderful. And we will hope to do this sometime soon live, live together and not in multi-state events. But thank you so much. And we hope that you have gotten a lot of great value out of this session with these panel of experts.
Thank you, Lauren. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.